Hello everyone, my name is Seth Savage, and I'm here to talk about the very complex and controversial topic of the Ukraine versus Crimea conflict, also known as the Ukraine versus Russia conflict. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce my guest crew, my dad, my brother, the cameraman, and my roommate, Micah. So, you guys heard me talk about the Ukraine versus Russia war, and most of you either don't know what it is at all or think it's all that thing that Putin did. And you have a right to. In fact, even the Euromaidan press thought that that war was Putin's war and it was thousands of people dying over one man's ego. But actually, this conflict has a very, very long history, and the Britannica dates it all the way back to 1853 with Catherine the Great. However, I have 6 minutes, so I'm not going to go all the way back then. I'm going to start in 2006 with the election between two people, Viktor Yushchenko and Viktor Yanukovych. And that is Viktor Yanukovych and Viktor Yushchenko. And once again, you hear those names and you either weren't paying attention at all or you think, wow, they're very similar. I'll have what they did and their names in the comments. But just to start, Global Security dubs Viktor Yushchenko as a nationalist under the Our Ukraine Party and Viktor Yanukovych under the pro-Russian. And Viktor Yanukovych was heavily favored in a territory called Crimea, which was a territory currently in Ukraine. It flipped throughout the generations, but it currently was in Ukraine. But he lost out to Viktor Yushchenko, who was a nationalist and won because of his hype in Ukraine. So he leads to a depression because he was elected in 2006, and there was a global depression, but it hit there very, very hard, and it very, very, very heavily angered the Crimeans, which caused them to rebel. This is known as the Donbass Rebellion, and it was the first huge issue in that. And this ends up happening all the way until a guy named Viktor Yanukovych ends up winning the next election. This was the guy who the Crimeans thought, this is our guy. He's going to help us get out. Maybe he might even have us get annexed into Russia. He did the exact opposite. He actually militarized Ukraine and ends to put down the Donbass Rebellion. This caused the Crimeans to look to Russia. It's like, please, Russia, help us, help us, help us. And they actually got that in 2014 in March, where Russia assists them, and this leads into the war that caused over 11,000 people to die, known as the Donbass War. And this war, like the name, it was fought in the Donbass region. And if you can see, you have Ukraine right here, Crimea down here, and then Russia is all past this way. But in this area, located center of them, is the Donbass area, and this is where most of the war was fought. So, this war lasts an extremely long time, or extremely short time, only 9 months, but over 10,000 people are dead. And it took a whole new president, Petro Poroshenko, a much more known person in history, to end this war. And they signed, in September of 2014, what is known as the Minsk Protocol or the Minsk Treaty. And that sounds, hey, we're getting close to 4 minutes, which is the minimum. This sounds like a great time for the story to be over. That's not at all what happened. This has had a long history, and it's going to have a much longer history. Because in 2015, in early 2015, there was another militarization attack with Russia, and it took another Minsk treaty, this time a summit between the EU, Russia, and Ukraine, to get this thing fully figured out, at least on the Russia standpoint. So the International Policy Party called the summit together, and it agreed that Russia was no longer to have a fight. They had a ceasefire already, and this time they agreed no more fighting. But that had nothing to do with Crimea. And to this day, and even in 2016, the International Business Times called Crimea and Ukraine a black hole of civil rights. This is a war that is still going on. They still want to be annexed to Russia, and um, they have all the things that can happen for another war, but luckily Russia has not gone. So at least we have that. So to end off, this isn't, Putin coming in and absolutely destroying this world, this country, and the UN has to protect everyone to get it fixed out. This was a long, long history of fighting between these countries that will still continue to this day. I'm Steph Savage. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.